I once again welcome you all to this interesting panel discussion on inclusive business models and the role of technology. I have with me an esteemed panel speaking here, the panel chair, Ms. Namrata Dubashi, who comes in from McKinsey and Company. She's a partner there. I have Mr. Asfar Khan, the Director of IT South Asia, Kellogg Company. Mr. Dilip Pattanayak, President and CHRO, Steel and Corporate, JSW. Mr. Sachin Khurana, Chief People Officer and VP People Practice from Happiest Mind Technologies. And last but not the least, Mr. Sudish Panicker, MD and Head of BNY Mellon, India. Over to you, Namrata. Request you to take it ahead.
Hi. Good afternoon, everyone. I think when I first came across the topic, spent some time thinking, what does this mean? I think we live in what I'd like to call a machine age today, and technology means several things. It can mean AI, it means software, it means social platforms, analytics. But I think to me, what it means most, and as we look ahead, is the blending of the physical and the digital worlds. And in that context, what does it begs the question, what does it mean to be human? What does it mean to each of us as we define our identity? And in that context, therefore, of our organizations, will technology be the great leveler? Will it be the great force of good and the force of inclusion? Or will it only drive harder the lines that exist and drive deeper the wedges between us? Look forward to the discussion, and I'd love to begin by inviting the panel here for opening comments. Maybe Sudish, if you could kick us off, that would be great.
Thank you, Namrata, and good afternoon to everyone. Look, business leaders recognize the indisputable fact that workplace diversity and inclusion efforts are more than just human resources responsibility. In fact, it's the company's responsibility. Now, as our world becomes increasingly connected, there's no room for discrimination. And I think leaders are recognizing very quickly in terms of how non-diverse, non-inclusive, biased environments can impact a company's brand. And to that effect, impair the ability of the organization to offer differentiating product and services to its clients, to its constituents, right? And which could have an impact on the company's whole financial sustainability. And therefore, if you really think about it from an ability to attract and retain talent in an empowering culture where innovation, transformation, collaboration, and all of that kind of comes into force, you really realize that technology could have a huge play in this whole ecosystem. Now, also, I think it's important to talk about the fact that technology can be an enabler. It can provide data-driven insights. It can actually help us create some scalable solutions, which can help change the way it can influence some of the processes that we have, but eventually it hopefully will contribute to changing behaviors. But that said, we all know that technology is not perfect, right? We also know that there's going to be a huge learning wheel as technology evolves, right? And I think it's up to us in terms of how do we contribute to that learning wheel of technology, which in turn, I believe will help progress and evolve the whole DEI framework. So let me just leave with those comments and go over to my fellow panelists.
Thank you, Sudish. Several interesting themes there, and we'll come right back to it. Asfar, if I may invite you, please.
Absolutely, Namrata, and thank you for the subject, because even when I saw the subject, I was very, differently intrigued to delve into it. And I think it's an interesting subject to talk about, because when we talk about diversity and inclusion, it starts from the question of identity. And technology plays a very critical role, because it's created a new whole identity framework for all of us. Okay, so we would classify diversity on the differences that we may have. Now, technology helps actually give us a very unique identity in its own self. Further, it obviously enables us, there are enough programs, not only in the HR space of working, but in the HR, which is the training and the onboarding of talent that you find, in the enablement of employees, okay, and in bringing together platforms which bring out or reduce the gaps that are there. And we keep talking about wage differences between gender diversity. That's become a key focus in today's discussion, but diversity is a lot more than just gender diversity. So there are a lot of technologies available to enable and help us bridge those gaps out. But I think in this conversation today, we should also talk about the benefits of all this happens. But we should also talk about technology is not a one button, you switch it on and everything's rosy and red tomorrow. It comes with its own layers and responsibilities. Okay? It comes with some very cleanly identifiable negatives on that scenario. Do we really want it to take over the entire enablement exercise that we want to do? It doesn't. So let's talk about those subjects, because all of these, each one of them is actually very exciting to talk about. And hand it over back to you, Namrata, because I'm really looking forward to a fun discussion.
Thank you so much, Asfar. Yes, I think we're going to run out of time for sure. Sachin, why don't you try?
Thanks, Namrata. And when you have Sudish and Asfar only giving a context, beautifully, I will just add maybe a section, onto this, where I said, these days the softer aspect of an organization have become much more important, even given the new generation who are looking for their association with an organization. How the organization attend those softer aspects, which is around the social contribution, which is around the environmental impact, which is about the organization efforts around well-being, and the organization's diversity and inclusion. There, the whole aspect of diversity and inclusion becomes the core of the business, especially in the industry like service industry, and more specifically to the IT services that we are part of. We are into people's business, and we need to ensure that people are the only differentiation an organization like us have to offer. And we are also in the forefront in terms of the whole technology transformation happening. We're kind of a digital company, and we are helping with solutions around the AI, ML, and the latest digital stack to various organizations in their endeavors, both internally and externally. So it is an expectation built both internally and externally to blend the technology and the intent of the organization around creating a more inclusive workplace. And in that whole theme, excited to be part of this discussion to see, how our Empower, Enable program that we have around the DNI, how that stitches in, and what I, looking forward to hear and contribute in those regards. Yeah.
Thank you, Sachin. Thank you. And Dilip, over to you, finally. Yes.
So good afternoon, everyone. And I think the panelists have shared their point of views, and they are quite enriching. I'm an odd man out in this panel because I represent manufacturing, and manufacturing is one area where we have to go a long way in terms of diversity and inclusion. To me, actually, diversity and inclusion, if I really look at it, where should this journey lead us to? And I think the journey should lead us to an environment where our organization should reflect the microcosm of the society. Unless until we have done it, I think we have not landed it there. So from that point of view, I think there are a lot of enablers, and technology is not the only enabler. I think what is happening is, even from a policy framework, if you really look at it, apart from technology, even the government has started in terms of looking at diversity and inclusion in organization. And some of them gets reflected in the labor codes that have been promulgated by the government, whether inclusiveness of transgenders, allowing female employees to work in the night shifts. But all of these finally have to be integrated in the with the technology and advancement, so that we can really leverage the true value of digital and technology to drive diversity and inclusion, whether it is having a collaborative workplace where in the future of work, maybe not many people would be coming back to office, but would be working from anywhere and working from anywhere in terms of idea sharing, in terms of decision making. I think all these aspects will definitely be facilitated by technology. And I think as we move forward in terms of our discussion, I would also like to cover a little bit about how do we therefore integrate organizations with the larger society as a piece through our environment, social and governance framework. I think that is also a very, very important aspect of diversity and inclusion, because unless until you have the social license to operate, I think as organizations will not make it in terms of our larger objective. So with this, over to you, Namrata.
Thank you. Thank you, Dilip, for also expanding the aperture and taking us back to society. I think the one theme that cuts across everything all of you have said is clearly talent, and different aspects of it almost through the entire talent life cycle, be it recruitment, evaluations, onboarding and training, flexible models, and so on. And if anything, in the last 12 to 18 months, the war for talent has only become even more acute. Would love to start there. Sudish, do you want to talk about how maybe you're using technology in your organization to further the cause for talent?
Yeah, absolutely. And Namrata, I think we as an organization are thinking about it from different angles. So one is the whole recruitment talent acquisition space, right? And in the talent acquisition space, we know that there have been a lot of conversations in the industry in terms of what are some of the inherent biases that actually feed into the whole talent acquisition process. A couple of things which I think not just our organization, but I've kind of learned and heard others in the industry start thinking about, start leveraging. One example is AI-based software, which really helps you remove or reduce some of the inherent biases, right? What the software really does is it takes out some of those demographies like race, age, gender, and therefore helps us refine and improve some of those processes. Now, that said, I want to go back to a comment that was made at the beginning, that technology in itself is not going to be the single solution to how we recruit talent, right? So I think where we are using some of these technologies is really to make sure that we have scalable processes in place. Because if you really think about the whole talent acquisition space, we spend a lot of time doing screening manually, which I think a lot of these softwares, especially AI-based softwares, help you take out some of those biases in your primary screening. But is that going to eliminate some of your interview processes, some of your other selection criteria? Not necessarily, right? So we have assessment softwares which are helping us assess from a skills perspective, but there are still interviews which we have in place, which is really to assess folks on the softer aspect, the cultural fitment, the collaboration ability, the experiential knowledge that an individual kind of brings into the ecosystem, right? The second interesting piece around talent is also where the way jobs are posted, right? Because we all know that today it's an environment where you got to appeal to all the different segments of your candidate pool, right? For them to be interested in an opportunity. It's no longer enough for an organization to kind of state something on a job description for a particular target audience, right? Because the pool is expanding, your target audience could be expanding, right? In terms of your skills. And we are using some of this technology to make sure that those JDs are better written. It takes care of some of the exclusionary language, which may otherwise take out the appeal for certain candidate pool that we may not be able to tap into, right? In terms of attraction. So those are the few ways that we are thinking about it from a talent acquisition perspective. But I'm sure others on the panel have views on how are we engaging technology, to your point, from a working model perspective, how are we engaging technology for real-time listening and hearing. So would love to hear others' comments as well. Back to you, Namrata.
Thank you, Sudish. Just staying on the talent topic, Asfar, would love to have you come in on your points on identity, onboarding, and also some of the things to watch out for.
Absolutely. And Sudesh, the other day when we were talking, you flagged this out that today we have a quantity problem and then we have a quality problem. And technology does help you in identifying a quantity problem. So I have a large volume of people coming in, especially for organizations which are in mass or are larger in sales. And Dilip, you'd probably see it because there is a large framework to do. But just take a step back, and I'll just go into a bit into the root of how does a technologist read this out. So you see, when you build this AI, ML, machine language things, you're doing absolutely what we do to children. So as we were growing up in our lives, we would see multiple experiences, instances, images, and then build a perception across our mind. So if I keep showing a tree to a child and I say, this is a small tree, this is a big tree, this is a large tree, this is green in color, slowly over a period of time, when he sees anything in that shape and size, he starts saying this is a tree. Now, that's exactly what the softwares are teaching the systems. They're telling them repeatedly, see a multiple type of these candidates. This is what you need to do. The fun part of this, Sudish, is that if I tell them that not everything that green, which is green, is a tree, okay, and you take that bias out, okay, you just take that green factor out, it will flag yellow and red and other colors and say these could also be trees, okay, in that science. While it helps solve the quantity problem, I still don't think it helps solve the quality problem, okay, because there is still the human bias and it's built after something that we cannot replicate out in that color of trees type scenario. And Dilip, yourselves, all of you have spent immense amount of years added together in this room. We're talking of almost 150 years of experience. If you look at it. Now that comes with that repeat scenario. Some of this is not a science, it's an art. And like I was saying the other day, technology will help us solve the problem of what is easily identifiable. It'll not help us solve the artistic part of it or the undefined part of it, not the zeros and with the gray areas of our mindset. It doesn't go into that currently, at least. We're going there. So that's one aspect to it. Second was like Namrata, you were saying, our bias came because very similar to a child growing up, we saw or we were told or fed information, okay, that this is A and this is good or this is bad or this is gray or whatever you want to call it. Okay. It's not going to go away because today I just tell you that now red has become the favorite color for everyone. So everyone should start liking red. Okay, it doesn't work like that. But it means that with platforms and identity, we have created a new digital name for you. So for me, Namrata would probably be an email ID or a phone number. That's your identity digitally. Okay, I wouldn't really know the person Namrata in that sense, which means it doesn't really make a difference to me if she's from a different gender, she's from a different country, a different color, whatsoever, okay, whatever her orientations are, which means now I judge her on the basis, or there is actually no judgment on the basis of anything else that was relevant in the past. So it did help me create a new identity for all of you. But the trouble side, and we're seeing that a lot, is that because you don't have any one of the protection layers that we had built for you, and an example I'm using, you're an Indian, so I would have assumed you're following a certain culture. Now, since you're a number to me, I don't know which culture you're following. And in that case, I don't know how you will react to a certain word I use, okay, because now I've lost that knowledge. It's no more relevant. So it has its pros and cons on identity management overall. It has a bearing and helps some of these critical, mass volume problems that we face. It doesn't go into some areas, and those areas are the ones I think that keep this still fun,
I think what both of you are saying goes to the core of unconscious bias, which again goes to the core of all discussions on inclusion. So thank you, both of you, for raising that. If we can just switch gears a bit and talk about the fact that we are actually living in the middle of a life at-scale social experiment with these new working models in the middle of the pandemic. Sachin, what has it done to you in terms of, and your organization, in terms of working models? And would love to hear that in the context of a services industry, and Dilip, after that from you in the manufacturing industry.
Oh, definitely. Thanks, Namrata. Beautifully, the whole thought of unconscious bias being the base when we talk about diversity and inclusion. How this shift, which is the shift to the hybrid, in fact, I would say fully virtual to begin with in an IT services, may move towards hybrid in the coming months. This world has really, it's like a forced change, it's a forced transformation for every organization, including the internal functions like HR. And when we look at that, what are the key things that as an HR that we need to look at? You need to look at as an organization culture. There is a communication happening. There's a collaboration happening. There is a capability development initiatives happening. Celebrations happening. These are your rituals. You have rituals around this. That's what builds your culture. The recognition that happens. So there was a way of working all of this, and then suddenly we have to look at a new way of doing the same intent to achieve the same intent. And how this opened up is that suddenly there is a realization, more acceptance of the biases that were impacting us. And we wanted to actually remove all those biases which were coming, which were, again, I said, was more like a forced change. Suddenly, and now everybody's sitting at home, we are hiring people, and with the current talent purview where the demand is more and the supply is limited, the focus has now shifted from all the other non-relevant item to the only relevant item. That's what Asfar was talking about, really what matters. You look at those skills and you onboard those people. The whole onboarding experience, the whole right from that experience to the onboarding experience to building a team camaraderie experience has become virtual. In that there were people. So when we talk about diversity, we're talking people who are different styles. So some people are introvert. Some people are from a different community and they are not very comfortable speaking with a set of people from a majority community. What this virtual done happen, what virtual created is people can be comfortable in their home, be on audio only, and an introvert person can put across his perspective much stronger. The same thing can happen on chat. If people are a little hesitant about asking something, can do that with the mode of the Teams calls, the chat. You can put across your perspective. You can ask something. We suddenly seen the participation to our programs, which is development, values, communication session, has increased, not doubled. We're talking about 3 or 4 times. People who were hesitant to come in a group have now joined and be part of those conversations. I think that's a fantastic change that we're seeing, and that's what is helping us. This whole technology is helping us in this whole hybrid world. And now what we are also seeing is the future from a hybrid work perspective. We have actually hired like 40% of our headcount, net addition, we have done in the last 18 months. And we suddenly see more number of female members joining in. We're seeing members who have taken breaks, the women minds who have taken break and coming back. We have more acceptance of that. We're seeing people from tier 2, tier 3 cities have more acceptance, and the kind of suddenly we're looking at this heat map of our people from different locations. Suddenly looks like real spread, which is fantastic, which was not the earlier case. And I think that talks about the inherent diversity this whole hybrid and the virtual world brings. People from different behavioral trait, whatever dominance, whether more introvert, more extrovert, people from different language background, cultural backgrounds. There's more inclusiveness to this. And I think that's a change and shift we are seeing. And this whole technology spectrum of the MS Teams that, every organization is using their own structures, the whole recognition mechanism, which have been working in the new virtual world. The pat on the back is much faster here rather than, actually then thinking whether should I even say something to him or how will he perceive have changed, and, things a little faster here. I think that has evolved, even though, if you have to support some people from a certain background, where the employee resource groups are really building really well. We have now seen a community. We are building a community initiative where people who like photography, people who like music, they're coming together. The participation of those have again increased dramatically. People are seeing more like-minded people within the organization, which they were hesitating earlier. So I think I see that technology has enabled a more diverse and inclusive workplace, and making us think a little more how it will work when we actually move into a hybrid world, say, from next few quarters onwards. Few thoughts.
Thank you, Sachin. As a woman, I would say the added flexibility has been a bonus and a boon, actually.
Absolutely.
Dilip, over to you.
Yeah. So thank you. I think some of the views were quite enlightening, but at the same time, the way manufacturing has gone through tiding over this pandemic was a little different, because in manufacturing, you cannot adopt a hybrid model at your manufacturing facilities. So for example, in our largest steel plant like Vijayanagar, where we employ almost 30,000 people, people have to come to the manufacturing site really to work. Otherwise, a hybrid model doesn't work. A hybrid model works only in a corporate office. I'm a great proponent of technology and digital. But at the same time, I would also have the views that technology per se will not really bring about change in the diversity and inclusion space. That is my view, because all said and done, AI, ML, machine, all of these finally are also influenced by human biases, because the machine keeps learning the way we make decisions. So what really needs a shift is a mindset shift. Unless until there is a mindset shift, unless until there is a strong sponsorship from the leaders of an organization, diversity and inclusion is something which will stay more as a desirable kind of a thing than rather a reality on the ground. But at the same time, let me also say that technology to a large extent is helping us tide over some of these situations. And especially, I think the inherent bias around performance management is something which I believe objective performance management technology is really helping us, because once we move into something called as like we had learning in the flow of work, we have been thinking about how do we do performance management in the flow of work, where you continuously evaluate performance, and technology, I think, becomes a great tool there in terms of removing all biases from the process, because the moment you deliver something or the moment you do something, that gets evaluated and it gets captured by the system. So I think that is one area where we really want to leverage technology to its fullest to make sure that all conscious, unconscious biases are removed, and we bring in more diversity and inclusion there, more from a point of view that that we do not differentiate between any kind of people, irrespective of their background, irrespective of their gender, irrespective of their qualification, in terms of their final contribution towards the organization. Same thing is happening around in technology, is around building a culture of fairness, transparency, and meritocracy. I think these are very, very important, because if we follow these values, probably then it leads us more towards making sure that we are following the diversity and inclusion agenda in its letter and spirit. Because fairness finally is all about how you really give the right things to all the right set of people. So to sum it up, I think technology is not the only solution. It is one of the solution. I think what is the biggest thing that is required is a mindset shift, and especially in the manufacturing sector, to really bring in diversity and inclusion at the workplace.
No, thank you for raising the point on mindset shift. I think that that underlies everything, that cuts across everything, and technology can only get you that far. I want to build on your point on transparency that you made. The technology actually increases transparency in the organization, and that cuts across several facets. I would love to hear, and just looking at the watch, maybe a last set of comments on, does this increasing transparency again help inclusion? And are there things to watch out for or mitigate? I'd love to hear, as several of you in your opening comments also spoke about negatives that we should actively mitigate for. If I can maybe pass the ball back to Sudish to come in.
Yeah, sure, Namrata. In fact, one of the things around transparency is the concept of a team, I think, is going to change. And it started changing in many organizations. So let me just take an example to illustrate what I mean by that. Typically, when we think about teams, we think about teams in terms of the hierarchy, right? But when you look at some of the business outcomes that many organizations are trying to get to, I think the power of a cross-functional team, right, really comes forth. So for example, if you're making a new product launch, it's not enough for the product team just to get into a huddle, meet in a room and decide what to do, and then throw it over the wall to an operations group or a delivery group or a technology group, so on and so forth, right? It's very important in that construct, a team would actually be a cross-functional group, which should include a products folks, which should include technology folks, delivery folks, client management folks, etc. Right? So I think the future is going to move towards those kind of operating models. And those operating models will bring in the power of diversity of thought. Those operating models will bring in the power of inclusion, because now you may have subconsciously left out a particular group in a whole life cycle. But now in this kind of a construct, you start bringing in those people into the conversation.
Very nice.
Does it create more transparency? Yes, it creates more transparency, but it also ultimately gets you to a more inclusive business outcome.
Very, very nicely put. Asfar, can I?
Absolutely. And I was actually taking my notes out, and we all talked about the enablement part of it. Okay. And I'll just come to transparency. So if you want to simplify a very complex subject, it is a complex subject. We talked about the enablement capability that technology provides. And today, our employees in our workplace are more like customers. So everyone's talking about experience. So some of us delved on it, that what does technology do to change their experience? And because it's diversity and inclusion as the subject, you need different kinds of experiences. So it does enable that. But the point that you flagged out importantly, you see, transparency comes from knowing. We all accept that. And knowing comes from analytics and data. Okay. In our own organization, when you pick up information and you make it into sensible information, which means we simplify it and we are able to read it, at that moment, analytics allows us to first understand the problem and thus provide and take decisions to solve those problems. So to your point of transparency and the impact of technology, this is definitely a big, big enabler, because it allows us the competency to read the scenarios, understand them, and probably then take a known call and even overcome the biases that we were talking about earlier on. So many times the unconscious bias that we talk about, none of us as leaders, and we're all in the business of people at the end of the day, none of us really realize that we're acting because we don't have enough information. We've not really understood it. Technology helps you do that. So in that case, it is definitely a big, big, supporter to the overall transparency that we've been talking about.
Thank you, Asfar. Sachin?
Yeah, Namrata, maybe I would probably, in fact, I was reading one of the reports from one of the consulting firm where it says 1 out of 5 HR professionals think that the technology is going to increase the biasness in the coming world. So what we're talking about here is a real problem statement. And since Asfar and Sudish already talked about it, I would probably talk about that little thing, that this whole virtual world, which is saying that, with this whole virtual world technology, there's a culture of always on, which we are seeing. And with that kind of environment culture, this is going to actually adversely impact certain segment of people, from diverse backgrounds, PWD, or people who have to manage multiple priorities. It is impacting them, and it is going to negatively impact them. So we know technology is enabled working from anytime, anywhere, round the clock. Transparency, people are working every time, responding but also getting stress, and there would be a segment which will get adversely impacted. So we need to be cognizant of that.
No, thank you, Sachin, for bringing that. I think the always on, especially through the pandemic, has really gotten aggravated, if at all. Dilip, I just want to invite you in. You touched upon society. In closing, do you want to talk about a lot of what we've discussed was in the context of organizations, but reflections on the broader society at large? Any closing comments on that? Great.
Yeah, I think one of the very important elements of inclusiveness is really making the society inclusive in your day-to-day functioning as an organization. Because without the society, you can't really exist or carry out your business, and especially for large manufacturing complex. And I think this is one area where technology definitely has brought in a lot of scope to enhance this inclusiveness, whether it is in terms of making it very transparent with the society as to what you are doing using social media and other platforms, and at the same time also creating opportunities for them to really come and collaborate with you in all the efforts that you are making. So what technology is really helping is bringing together organizations and society using various technology platforms and making sure that the entire inclusive environment is fostered in a manner that everybody benefits. And I think that is the biggest boon that technology has given to us to bring everybody together.
Thank you very much.
Yeah,
thank you very much, Dilip. And on that note, I should say I'm walking away richer from this conversation. It's a complex topic. I think we've touched on several interesting facets of it. I will not even attempt to summarize. I will not do justice to this. But I walk away richer from this conversation. Thank you very much, each of you, for sharing your thoughts on the panel today.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Namrata, thank you, everyone.
Thank you so very much, Ms. Namrata Dubashi, for really bringing out those fantastic views from our panelists, our expert panelists, sharing the views of what they think, how can technology really advance further the D&I efforts. It's been a pleasure having you with us, Mr. Sachin Khurana, Mr. Dilip Pattanayak, Mr. Asfar, and of course, Mr. Sudish Panicker. It's I'm sure, like you said, Namrata, that our audience is richer. We've had so many takeaways from this panel discussion. Thank you once again for joining us. And as we look forward to some very interesting sessions, I'd once again like to urge all of you to head to your social media. Do comment on what you think about innovation, diversity, and inclusion for good business and more. Do remember to use our hashtag ETDNI as we look forward to our session in conversation and addressing the gender gap for women in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. The panel will be discussing on how their organizations are working towards enabling, empowering, and engaging women in STEM by running mentorship programs and encouraging women in role models. All this and more, all thanks to our expert panelists. Please welcome, we have with us Mr. Rajendra Mehta, President and CHRO, Westfund India. A very warm welcome to Ms. Virid Mivzari, Market Director, Startup Nation Central Israel. May I also present you Mr. Suraj Chetri, Regional Director, HR, Airbus India and South Asia. And of course, as our moderator, once again, a very warm welcome to Mr. Ashok Pamedi, social entrepreneur and former CEO, NASCOM Foundation. Let's look forward to this discussion and do send in questions for our expert panelists.